All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a truly massive shift happening in education right now. It's this whole journey from textbook to transformation, specifically focusing on the competency classroom. We're finally, thankfully, moving away from that old era of rote memorization. But what does that actually look like in practice? Let's get into it.
To really wrap our heads around this shift, let's try a quick thought experiment straight from the source material. Imagine, for a second, that you've been tasked with teaching a kid how to fly an airplane. You're standing at the front of a room, holding up this beautifully illustrated cover page of a jet, and you just start explaining the aerodynamics. You point out the wings, the engine, the landing gear. Now, ask yourself, can that kid actually fly the plane just by listening to you talk about it?
Well, the crucial point here is absolutely not, right? Explaining the parts of an airplane transfers information, sure, but practicing in a flight simulator, that is what actually builds competence. Pilots don't learn just by having things explained to them. They learn through experience, through practice, simulation, and reflection. And exactly the same principle applies to what's happening in our classrooms. If we actually want students to navigate the complexities of the 21st century, they simply cannot learn purely by passively listening to a lecture. They literally have to experience the material.
Now what's really fascinating about all this is that the tools to build this kind of simulator are actually already sitting right there on the students' desks. As educators, there's this huge temptation to just skip over those little sidebars, the warm-ups or the group activities, just so we can power through the core text. But here's the thing, those features are actually hidden teaching strategies. When you spot a mindful moments box, that isn't just filler, that's structured social-emotional learning. Concern for Globe? That ties directly into sustainable development goals. Modern pedagogical frameworks like India's NEP 2020 are literally hiding in plain sight within these pages. The textbook isn't just a reading document, it's practically a toolkit for building competencies.
So let's see how this translates into real classroom action. A really common misconception is that teaching 21st century skills requires, highly expensive, cutting-edge technology. But that's not true at all. In one of the workshop strategies outlined in our sources, trainers put a single, ordinary lemon on a table. Just a lemon. And they pose this challenge to the teachers. What are the maximum uses you can find for this one lemon? I actually want you to think about that for a second. What would your list look like?
Usually, the answers just come rapid fire. Juice, obviously. Pickle. But then people start getting really creative. You could use it for decoration, for cleaning copper, maybe as a battery in a science experiment, or even as a natural medicine. In a matter of seconds, this totally simple, low-cost object instantly sparks collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. There are absolutely no iPads or smartboards required here. Just a clever prompt that shifts the brain from passive reception to active generation.
And that brings us to a pretty profound realization from the workshop material. The lemon is just a metaphor. It's one object, but it has so many possibilities. And honestly, that is exactly what a single textbook page is. A traditional educator might look at a page and just see a list of facts that need to be memorized. But an innovative educator? They look at that exact same page and see endless, interactive possibilities for investigation, for debate, and creation. Ultimately, it's the mindset of the teacher, not the ink on the page, that really dictates the quality of the learning.
A perfect example of this mindset shift is what the training actually calls the HOTS factory. HOTS, of course, standing for Higher Order Thinking Skills. Let's look at a traditional question. It asks, what is evaporation? Well, that relies entirely on rote memory. A student can just parrot back a definition without actually understanding a single thing. But if you tweak that question just a little bit and ask, why do clothes dry faster in summer than winter? Well, suddenly the whole burden of learning shifts. The student actually has to visualize the real world, apply the scientific concept of evaporation, and then articulate a logical conclusion. It's the exact same topic, but an entirely different cognitive workout.
To really cement this idea, the workshop uses this fantastic metaphor called the pencil story. Imagine holding up a pencil and asking someone, what makes this useful? Well, it's the wood, it's the shape, but most importantly, it's the lead. If you snap that lead, the pencil is basically useless. It can't write. The lesson here is that a textbook alone, which is the content, simply cannot teach. Content without a solid teaching strategy and deep child engagement results in absolutely zero learning. All three of those elements have to work together perfectly.
And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate paradigm shift we're unpacking today. If you want to picture this new classroom, you have to think in circles, not straight lines. The old classroom operated on a highly linear, very passive track, right? The teacher explains, the student takes notes, they do their homework, and then they take a test. It's very point A to point B. But the competency classroom model is completely cyclical and active. Students start with an experience, then they think about it,
They discuss it with peers, apply the concept, reflect on the outcome, and improve. It's dynamic, it's a little messy, but it's how real human beings actually acquire lasting skills.
So how do we systematically build that cyclical classroom? Well, we use what the sources call the thinking ladder, which, if you're familiar with it, is basically Bloom's taxonomy. Let's walk through it step by step using a really simple topic, plants. We start right at the base, remember, just naming the parts. Then we move up to understand, explaining the function. But we don't stop there. We push them up the ladder to apply, maybe actually growing a plant. Then analyze, how does a cactus compare to a rose? Evaluate, which of those plants survives best in a desert environment? Until finally, we reach the very top, create, where they might design their own ideal garden. Doing this ensures that higher-order thinking is literally engineered into every single lesson plan.
As we start nearing the end of this explainer, I kind of want to shift the tone to something a bit more reflective. The source material outlines a highly emotional, super powerful motivational activity that's used to close out the teacher training. The trainer walks around, hands a single physical seed to each teacher in the room, and then poses this incredibly simple yet totally profound metaphorical question. What is inside a seed?
And the answers they get are just beautiful. Inside that tiny hard shell is a towering tree. There are bright flowers, sweet fruits, cooling shade, life-giving oxygen. As the trainer points out, none of these things are actually visible today. You look at that seed and you see absolutely none of it. Yet, the pure potential for all of those magnificent things is undeniably hidden right there inside, just waiting for the right environment to bloom. Which, of course, immediately leads to the exact same question, drawing a direct parallel to the students sitting in classrooms all around the world. When an educator looks out at 30 faces on a Monday morning, what is really inside a child? Well, it's everything. A future scientist who might cure a disease, a teacher who will inspire thousands, a doctor, an artist, a leader, an innovator. The core message of this entire competency-based framework is really about reminding educators of their profound, world-shaping impact. You know you aren't just finishing Chapter 4 of a science textbook. You are nurturing hidden potential. You are developing competencies that are going to serve these human beings for the rest of their lives.
And that brings us right to our final thought. The source material closes with this truly powerful quote. A good teacher teaches a lesson. A great teacher creates an experience. And, I would add, a transformational teacher develops competencies for life. If there is just one thing you take away from this explainer today, let it be exactly that. We absolutely must move beyond just covering the syllabus and start actually uncovering the vast possibilities within our students. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this vital shift in education. I'll leave you with this one question to think about. What kind of experience are you going to create next?